I do have one thing I want to address because I do go through your letters, your questions. It's important to me if I perceive, even if one person writes me something and they say they don't understand something I've taught on, and I don't really want to do this right now, but I'm going to because I don't know if the opportunity will come again. So as many of you know, we just finished recently a long series on the emergence of Judaism, its development, and so forth. And there are some folks who are still a little bit confused about this. I will touch on this again because we will be heading into another series. Uh-oh, how'd that happen? So I will eventually have to touch on it again to explain it for people who maybe missed it. But for the folks who are confused, and I need to clarify this because this is something that comes up often. There will be people who periodically will write me and will say, well, you know, the late Dr. Gene Scott taught so-and-so, or he taught thus and so. I'm going to tell you, good for him, all right? That's his teaching. I do my own research, and when I say I do my own research, I learned very early on, and I hope you can understand this because it requires me clarifying this. You know, when I first started teaching, and of course, most of you have been along for the journey. Show me your hands, those of you who've been here since I took over. Okay. So, you know, I never had the necessity to double check anything. Never. I just took at face value what was taught here, and I'm not saying good or bad. I'm simply telling you from a scholar's perspective, that was a big mistake to just take anybody's word, and I don't care who it is, and just take it and run with it. Because that applies if the person who taught those things could be here to refute them, but he's not. And I cannot just parrot back what somebody else has said. There are expressions I use on an ongoing basis, which can't help that. But you can't parrot. If you're really studying the book, you are going to come up with things that either may change the perspective, the understanding. We saw that for the class that did take Hebrew with me and studied Hebrew. Okay, we saw that when we translated Psalm 84, and that's no disrespect to the late Dr. Gene Scott and his acumen, his scholarship, does nothing to it, but it does show you two things, maybe three things here. I am not just simply taking something he did and regurgitating it out to you. I do not believe in that. If that's what I do, I shouldn't be here, number one. Because this vocation I have requires me to constantly be digging in the pursuit of truth. And whatever, I've said to you, whatever that truth is, even if it contradicts something I've said, I'm going to speak the truth to you. No ego here. So you do a disservice to me when you say, what, you know, Dr. Scott said this and he taught that, that's good for him. But I can't refute that with him, and I'm not going to be bound by people who are either so close-minded and myopic that they cannot get out of, well, we're still killing saber-toothed tigers, even though they're extinct. That's not to say that things that he said weren't correct. It's to say, and I go back to this particular example because it suits and makes the point adequately. When a whole class of people, I think we had probably 40 plus maybe 50 people learning Hebrew, and we got to the point where I said, here, you all are going to have an assignment. I'm going to make you translate Psalm 84 and see what you come up with. There was not one singular exact translation. Why? Because of the nature of Hebrew and its ambiguity. But we also saw when people began to read out what they had translated, it sounded different. So unless you are the proverbial cheater copying everything somebody else says, and we're going to get into that today, interpretation is really important. And there's a lot of interpretation according to how people perceive, understand. With all that being said, you cannot, if you are doing your part, you cannot come into this building or write me a letter and lecture me on what somebody else said. If you don't think that part of my homework is knowing what not only Gene Scott, but every other scholar on the subject that I'm addressing said, and that's important for me to know. But you're sorely mistaken if you think I'm just going to parrot back because that's either what you heard 20 years ago or what you think or what you think I think you might want to hear. I don't care what you want to hear. I'm going to teach you what I find to be the truth, and if it contradicts either something I've said or he said, be lucky that I don't have an ego that says, well, I could never address the congregation and say I or he were wrong. Now, if you can't appreciate that, I don't know what to tell you, because this is a teaching ministry. It means even in the process of this person studying, I may find things that are either not so or so much more, and I will address them as such. You have to have the confidence of doing your part in your research, and the confidence that, as I said, go check me out. I provide usually either the references or I'll tell you it's an opinion. But I cannot have people perpetually doing this to me. It doesn't work for me, and I'm just asking you as a favor. I look at you all in my listening audience, not necessarily, we're all students, but I look at you as a higher level of learners, people who have actually put aside all the garbage that people think church is to come out, study, and learn. So I can appreciate, put this aside for a reason. I put this aside not knowing actually that I was going to address this in this way. Here's somebody who says, they say a lot of nice things and very nice compliments, but then they say, because they said they'd like to sit down and discuss God's word for hours. The person says, I don't always agree with her, but I respect her desire to seek the truth. That's what ministry should be about. We're not talking about some far-flung theories of things. We're talking about the pursuit of what's in this book. And interpretation, by the way, is a very blurry area, unless you're going to come across to show and put on display, even with linguistics, you still may encounter problems. So please do me a favor and don't do that to me, all right? It's almost like saying, imagine, I'm going to give you the stupidest example. Imagine I get in the car with you. You are going to drive me somewhere, but you've driven me for 20 years, and the minute you start driving me, and you're doing this as a favor to me, the minute you start driving, I start criticizing how you're driving and how you're doing it and what you're doing. But listen, it doesn't work that way. So I'm asking you as a congregation, but I'm also telling you I have my limits too. And my limits start and stop with, I've told you, check out what I'm saying. There isn't anything that I've said to you that I've said, oh no, don't go look, don't go search that out. In fact, I encourage you to. I also encourage you to be in the pursuit of your own truth. That means you may have heard something I've said and it puzzles you and you go out there and you start digging. That's awesome. I'm not afraid of that. Neither should you be. So if I say things that either sound contradictive or well, he didn't teach that, listen to me. Again, there is no one that will respect Dr. Jean Scott more than yours truly. I have spent 18 plus years defending the nuts, the crazy people, the lunatics who have come against me, all under the guise that somehow I usurped Dr. Scott's ministry, okay? So the foolishness of that is exactly that. But for all the other people who cannot grow up, this is what scholarship looks like. Scholarship isn't, I'm just going to tell you what you want because that's what you want to hear. And sometimes scholarship comes in the form of, did you ever consider looking at it upside down, backwards and inside and out? And most of us haven't. That has been my approach for 18 years. So just do me a favor. If you're here to learn, keep an open mind and be a learner. And if you don't agree with me, that's okay too, because I've said this before and I will say it again. Find me two people, whether it's a husband and wife or best friends, anybody on earth that agrees 100% of the time with that other person. Show me that person, and I'll tell you that's a great anomaly because we don't always see eye to eye. So if you find somebody you can be at least, even in ministry, at least 90%, you've done a good job. You found somebody worth listening to, because most, I'm just going to tell you out there, and take offense all you want, most things called church are not worth listening to. They're a waste of time. Yeah, I said it, okay? So if you disagree with me, I have no problem with that. Like this person was very nice to say that, because that's important to me. Just going along like this says you have no thoughts of your own. You have no scholarship, no desire to search, to dig, to verify. And there is a problem for me because that puts you in the category of the rest of the people out there who are just going with the flow and whatever they're told, they just go with it, not looking for that.
To this house, magnify the Lord, lift up holy hands, our hearts in one accord, worship and bow down.